My first question is, what does it mean to you to be a New York Times bestselling author? I know there's a lot of authors who are younger, but you hit it at such a young age. What does it mean to you to be a New York Times bestselling author, and what experiences have you gotten because of that you were like, you know, a boy from Montana would not have otherwise gotten to experience? Okay, go ahead now.
I'm going to give you 3 answers. One's silly, the rest are serious. The silly answer is that being a New York Times bestselling author means that no matter what else I write in my life, when I die on my tombstone it can say, New York Times bestselling author Christopher Paolini. And you notice that happens to every author who's had a New York Times bestselling book. Everything else they write from then on is a New York Times bestselling author, or book, from an author. You know what I mean. Seriously though, this has allowed me to do what I really love to do, which is tell stories. And for that, I am immensely grateful. You know, if it weren't for the support of the readers and booksellers all around the world, none of this would have been possible. And because of it, as you sort of asked and implied in your question, I have gotten to do many things that would have been otherwise out of my reach. You know, I have stood on the stage with Angela Merkel, head of Germany, and the head of the EU, and I've gotten to fly in planes with the Army parachute team. I've gotten to duel swords with a fencing team at one of my events. I had a guy in a centaur suit come up to one of my events.
That's awesome.
I had Tom Waits come through one of my lines.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know who he was. That's how shut out of it I am sometimes. All sorts of things like that. But overall, the main thing is just the fact that I can do this and that I get to meet the readers and have such a good time.
Very cool. Okay, kind of for the young writers out there, what avenue did you take to learn to write? Like, how did you learn to write your novel, and then what did you do like to make your world? I know you drew maps and stuff like that, but do you have like the big poster board but had like everything drawn out where?
No, that's only in movies where they have the lines of string and stuff.
Yeah.
That usually indicates that you're going insane.
Yeah.
In my case, actually that's a really good question. That's okay. I knew I wanted to write and I knew I wanted to tell stories, and I tried writing several books or several stories before Aragon. In fact, I even took a stab at Aragon before it was even Aragon. That was back when Aragon was named Kevin.
Oh, it was Kevin. I saw something that you...
And it was actually set in this world to begin with. But I couldn't get past the first few pages of all the stories. I had the cool idea, I get 4 or 5 pages in, and then I would hit a wall. And the main reason was because I didn't know what happened next. So I said, okay, I don't know how to write. I don't know what I'm doing. So my parents very kindly got me a bunch of books on writing, and we had some already, and I got to check some out in the library. And some of them that were helpful for me were Story by Robert McKee. It's actually a book on screenplay writing. And that taught me a lot about the structure of stories. And the very fact, I wasn't even really aware consciously of the structure of stories until then. And that allowed me to construct the plots that I needed. And then Characters and Viewpoint by Orson Scott Card, which helped me sort out the difference between third-person point of view and limited third-person point of view. Which is actually rather important, among other things. And then, once I'd read a bunch of those books, I actually basically spent a good chunk of 1998 reading those books, and once I felt like I understood the concepts, I said, okay, I'm going to try plotting out an entire book from start to finish, and I'm not going to write it. All I want to do is to see if I can construct a story. So I did. I came up with a world and a story, and it starred a young woman named Arya, who happened to be a princess. And I was actually rather pleased with the story, but I never wrote it. I put it aside, and I said, okay, now I know I can plot a book. Now I'm going to try plotting a trilogy, because, of course, all great fantasy stories are trilogies, right? And although I think now we're going up into quadrilogies, but partly my fault, partly Ted Williams, partly George R. R. Martin's.
Yes.
And so I plotted it, and so my thought was, I'm going to plot out this trilogy, and then I will write the first one, and the first one is going to be a practice book, just to see if I can write 500 pages or so, because I've never written that much. And once I write my practice book, I will then go write a real book. So, I won't try to do anything totally newer original. I'll just try to do a tribute to the fantasy that I enjoy reading, and then I'll go write a real book. Well, Aragon was my practice book.
Oh, wow.
And I did. I plotted out the trilogy, and then I plotted out the first book, Aragon, in even greater detail, and then I actually dove into it. So that's how I got into the writing. As for how I actually learned to write, aside from plotting, basically, I've heard it said that basically, your first million words are going to kind of jangle. They're not going to sound very good. Kind of like when playing the violin, you're not going to sound very good until you've practiced and practiced and practiced. So practice is a big part of it. But even more importantly is editing. You need to have your music instructor come in and tell you when you're hitting the wrong notes. And it's very hard to accept editing sometimes, but very important because you'll learn more from it than you ever will from the writing. So I was fortunate enough to have parents who were very good at editing, and then of course I got my wonderful editor at Random House. And that's how I learned how to write, and I'm still learning how to write.
It's an evolving thing.
It's a long answer to a short question.
Okay, and this actually is one of Alex's questions. Alex is a big fan, so that's why he's here.
Since I saw your thing in Newsweek back in 2003, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. Were there any points in our history, either like the U.S. or world history, that influenced plot or just the development of the world of the cycle?
Well, I read a history of ancient engineering when I was on tour for Brissinger, which influenced some of the plot points in Inherited, some of the major stories with Roran. And other than that, well, and the thing with the contraband black market lace in Eldest, that's based on historical facts that, lace used to be worth more than its weight in gold.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, also all the wars of the past 10 years certainly sort of played into my awareness of war and violence and that sort of thing, which I was already aware of, but it definitely was maybe a little more in my mind than it would have been otherwise. But I wouldn't say I was really basing anything specifically historically. Well, of course, I shouldn't say that, because I have my ancient language, which is based partially on Old Norse, and of course I did quite a bit of reading on the Norse legends and stuff like that, and that all informed my reading. Actually, as soon as I get home, one of the things in my reading pile is The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbons, which, while no longer completely historically accurate, is a great story, and I think probably a good inspiration for the way civilization works and how it actually functions. Boy, these are big books.
And they weigh a lot.
They do weigh a lot.
They get denser over time, I noticed.
Okay, next question is, what was the hardest and the best part of the cycle to write? Scenes or like moments, you don't have to be, no spoilers obviously. But...
Well, that restricts me to the other first three.
First three.
I will say some of my favorite bits are in the last book. But a lot of the stuff, all of the chapters from Saphira's point of view, I enjoyed those a great deal. The scene of forging Aragon's sword, Brissinger, Brom's death, some of the battles, anything with Angela or Elva. So quite a few bits. I think the hardest, as I'm actually going to talk about in the presentation here, the hardest was finishing this last book, and that's partly because of the length, and partly because I really wanted to make sure it was as good as possible, considering that it was the end of this series. An end of the story.
Yeah, always good to end on a high note there.
Well, you don't have to end on a high note, but you should end on a memorable note.
Yes. High is, to the
There are very few symphonies that end on a high note.
Oh,
and you go to your crescendo, and then you give it a moment of calm right at the end to let that emotion sink in, and that's what I tried to do.
Interesting metaphor. And then this is our one book-related question that we were trying to think of that wasn't wasn't very spoilery.
But wait, have you guys actually read the fourth book already?
I have not. They were most of the way through it.
Dare I ask, did you enjoy it?
I have enjoyed the other ones. I was waiting for today to get my copy.
Oh,
so.
But you guys are happy.
But they've downloaded mine on my
computer,
right? Gotcha.
Yes, unfortunately my TBR pile is.
It's like
Thank you.
good.
You know, that actually was the comment, see, because I didn't actually read the book until I got to editing. Because I hadn't finished the first draft until I got to editing. And that was the thing that really, really got me, was when I read through, it was the comment I made to my editor, Michelle. I said to her, you know, this is a really intense book. I said, you know, there are 8-year-olds who are going to try to read this book. Are you? And she said, no, she said, it's what's right for the story, and she said, go with it. But it definitely got me, even me, when I was raised, like, did I write that? Whoo, what was, whoa! But it was fun.
Yeah, so our one question, book-related question was, how did you come up with the concept for the Dragon's Heart of Hearts and that whole concept?
Well, I saw a painting a long time ago. I mean, we're talking maybe back when I was 6 or 7 or earlier, of a dragon with this sort of flaming gem near it. I have no idea the context, okay? It was just some fantasy painting. And when I created my dragons, of course, I gave them gem-like scales. And then, of course, I also established that in my world, energy or power can be stored within gems as well, within gemstones. And almost like batteries. And I started thinking about the fact, well, the dragons have gem-like scales. Could they store energy in them? Well, maybe not, but what if they had some sort of organ, like their gems, but they could store energy in it, since I have spirits, which are essentially coherent energy, which is conscious. And I said, okay, well, what if the dragons can store their consciousness in this organ, which became the Eldenari. And I'm actually very pleased with the Eldenari, because I think it's one of the things that really makes my dragons different from other dragons, and it's not some extraneous thing either. I mean, it really plays into the story and makes a big difference in the world.
Yeah, and it gives the dragons like a heart, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that they're not just animals or creatures, that there's something more. So, yeah.
So is that our
That was our last question.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I do want to say, that I'm immensely proud of Inheritance. I think it's the best book in the series. And I hope that everyone who reads it is going to find it a very satisfying and hopefully also surprising conclusion to the series and the world and the characters. So thank you for reading.
Thanks.